The morning Mary Beth Cooper came face to face with the bear started like any other September dawn in Montana, except for one thing. The woods were silent. In 28 years of walking these trails, she had never heard Thunder Creek this quiet. Mary Beth paused beside a towering ponderosa pine, her hand resting on its rough bark. The familiar scent of sun-warmed pine needles filled the crisp mountain air. But something was off. No chattering squirrels. No morning birdsong. Even the creek seemed to whisper rather than bubble. Every instinct her grandfather had carefully cultivated in her screamed that this silence meant something. When the forest goes quiet, it means you need to listen harder, Grandpa Joe used to say. Those words, along with everything else he had taught her about these mountains, had kept her safe through countless solo trips checking the wildlife cameras scattered across their family's land. The weight of her camera bag pressed against her hip as she scanned the tree line. The morning sun painted long shadows across Thunder Creek Trail, and a light mist still clung to the valley below. She should have been at Camera Station 3 by now, downloading this week's footage of the local elk herd, but that unnatural silence held her rooted to the spot. Mary Beth pulled out her worn leather journal, the same one she had used to document wildlife patterns for the past 5 years. Everything about this morning needed to be recorded. The silence, the stillness, the way even the aspen leaves had stopped their usual quivering dance in the morning breeze. Her grandfather had taught her that understanding nature meant paying attention to these small details. The crack of a branch echoed through the silence. Mary Beth's hand stilled mid-sentence, her pen hovering above the journal's page. Another crack, closer this time. She slowly closed the journal and slipped it into her pocket, movements careful and deliberate just as she had been taught. The sound came from behind the rise to her left, where the trail curved around a granite outcropping. Years of experience had taught her the difference between the sound of a deer moving through underbrush and something larger. This was definitely larger. She reached for the bear spray on her belt, a habit as natural as breathing after 3 generations of her family living alongside Montana's wildlife. The massive grizzly emerged from behind the rocks with a grace that belied its size. Mary Beth's breath caught in her throat. She had documented dozens of bears over the years through her camera lenses, but this one was different. It moved with purpose, its dark eyes fixed directly on her. No aggression, no fear. Just an unsettling intelligence that made her question everything she knew about these creatures. This wasn't a chance encounter. The bear had approached deliberately, choosing to make its presence known. As Mary Beth stood there, heart pounding, but body still, she realized this was what her grandfather had tried to prepare her for all those years ago. Sometimes, he would say, nature reaches out to us in ways we don't expect. The trick is being quiet enough to understand what it's trying to tell us. The bear took another step forward, and Mary Beth knew with absolute certainty that her morning was about to become anything but ordinary. Everything Mary Beth Cooper knew about bear encounters told her to make herself look big, make noise, and back away slowly. She raised her arms above her head, her weathered denim jacket making her appear larger, and spoke in the firm, loud voice that had deterred countless bears before. "Hey bear, move along now." The grizzly simply tilted its head, regarding her with those intelligent eyes. No huffing, no teeth, no signs of aggression. It stood its ground, maintaining a distance of about 30 yards. In all her years documenting Montana's wildlife, she had never seen anything like this. Mary Beth took a careful step backward, her boots crunching on fallen pine needles. The bear matched her movement, stepping forward just enough to maintain the same distance. Her heart raced, but her mind remained clear, cataloging every detail of this bizarre encounter. "This isn't right," she muttered, reaching for her satellite phone. The ranger station always had someone on duty this time of year, with autumn bringing increased bear activity. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. She tried again, her eyes never leaving the bear. Still no answer. The grizzly sat down, its massive form oddly patient. Mary Beth had documented this particular bear before through her camera lenses. She recognized the distinctive silver-tipped fur around its face, the slight scar above its right eye. Local rangers had nicknamed it Old Silver. though at 7 years old, it was barely middle-aged for a grizzly. She tried every trick she knew. She clapped her hands sharply, the sound echoing through the silent forest. Old Silver didn't flinch. She pulled out her whistle, its shrill blast cutting through the morning air. The bear simply blinked, almost looking annoyed. When she banged her hiking poles together, the crash of metal on metal typically enough to send any bear running, Old Silver actually yawned. "What are you trying to tell me?" she wondered aloud, her grandfather's words echoing in her mind. 28 years in these mountains had taught her that animals sometimes behaved in unexpected ways. But this was different. The bear wasn't trying to drive her away or get to any food. It seemed to want her attention. Mary Beth checked the time on her phone. She had been standing there for nearly 40 minutes, caught in this strange standoff. Her next wildlife camera wouldn't check itself, but something told her this encounter was more important than her regular duties. The bear's behavior tugged at her memory, reminding her of something her grandfather had written in his journals about unusual animal encounters. When she finally took a step to the side of the trail, testing the bear's reaction, Old Silver stood up immediately. It moved parallel to her, maintaining that same careful distance but clearly trying to guide her in a specific direction. The realization hit her like a splash of cold creek water. The bear wasn't following her. It was leading her. Another call to the ranger station went straight to voicemail. Mary Beth took a deep breath, weighing her options. Every safety protocol said to avoid following a wild animal, especially a grizzly. But 3 generations of Cooper family wisdom whispered that sometimes nature broke its own rules for a reason. She pulled out her journal again, quickly noting the time, location, and the bear's peculiar behavior. If something happened to her, at least there would be a record. Then, against every conventional piece of wisdom about bear encounters, Mary Beth Cooper made a decision that would change everything. She took a step in the direction the bear seemed to want her to go. Old Silver's response was immediate. The massive grizzly turned and began walking ahead of her, pausing every few steps to look back as if making sure she was following. Whatever was about to happen, Mary Beth knew she had passed the point of an ordinary wildlife encounter. She was about to uncover something extraordinary in these familiar mountains, something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about these magnificent creatures. As Mary Beth followed Old Silver along the winding game trail, memories of countless hours spent documenting this particular bear flooded back. Last spring, she had photographed it teaching 2 cubs to dig for roots near Thunder Creek. In summer, her trail cameras had captured it fishing in the deeper pools, showing remarkable patience and skill. Every image, every observation had shown the same thing. This was no ordinary grizzly. The morning sun now filtered through the canopy above, creating shifting patterns on the forest floor. Old Silver moved with deliberate steps, choosing the easiest path through the underbrush. Whenever Mary Beth slowed or hesitated, the bear would stop, turn its massive head, and wait. There was no aggression, no frustration, just that same patient intelligence she had observed in her photos. "You know exactly where you're going, don't you?" she whispered, more to herself than the bear. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her thoughts, words from long ago when she was just a girl learning to read animal signs. "Animals don't waste energy, Mary Beth. Every movement has a purpose. You just have to figure out what that purpose is." The bear led her away from her usual routes, past weathered granite outcrops she had never photographed, deeper into the quiet heart of the forest. When they reached a fallen log blocking the path, Old Silver didn't climb over it. Instead, it circled around, finding an easier route that Mary Beth could follow. The behavior was so thoughtful it sent chills down her spine. She pulled out her journal again, hands steady despite the strangeness of the situation. Every detail needed to be recorded. The bear's careful pace, the way it chose paths wide enough for a human to follow, how it would pause at clearings as if checking landmarks. This wasn't random wandering. This was navigation. Something her grandfather had written in his final journal nagged at her memory. He had documented cases of animals exhibiting unusual behavior, seeking human help in times of crisis. A horse that had led riders to its trapped foal, a dog that had brought help to an injured hiker. But a wild grizzly? This was unprecedented. The forest grew denser, the underbrush thicker. Old Silver paused at a fork in the trail, looking back at her with those knowing eyes. When Mary Beth started to take the right path, the bear made a soft huffing sound almost like disagreement. It moved deliberately to the left trail, waited, and looked back again. Mary Beth thought of the camera data waiting to be collected, of the ranger station's unanswered calls, of every safety protocol she was breaking. But she also thought of her grandfather's most important lesson. Sometimes, Mary Beth, you have to trust that nature knows more than we do. The hard part is being humble enough to listen. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 3 generations of Cooper family wisdom settling on her shoulders. Every instinct, every lesson, every moment spent observing these mountains had led her to this decision. The bear was trying to show her something important enough to break the normal boundaries between wild and human worlds. Mary Beth adjusted her pack, checked her bear spray more out of habit than fear now, and chose to trust. She followed Old Silver down the left path, into a part of these mountains she had never explored. Whatever waited ahead would change everything she thought she knew about these magnificent creatures and their capacity for intelligence, purpose, and perhaps even compassion. The morning fog had lifted completely now, revealing a part of Thunder Creek's wilderness Mary Beth had never seen in all her years of documentation. Old Silver led her down a narrow game trail that wound between towering rock faces, their surfaces still glistening with morning dew. The bear moved with increasing urgency, though still maintaining that careful distance that had marked this strange journey from the start. The path suddenly opened into a hidden ravine, sheltered by ancient pines and steep rock walls. Mary Beth caught her breath at the sight. Delicate columbines bloomed in protected corners, and a small stream trickled down one rock face, creating a gentle music that seemed to magnify the ravine's secluded beauty. This was the kind of place that reminded her why the Coopers had chosen to protect these mountains for 3 generations. Old Silver stopped at the ravine's entrance, turning to look at her with those intelligent eyes. Then the bear did something unexpected. It lowered its massive head and released a soft whine, a sound Mary Beth had never heard from a grizzly before. The noise held an unmistakable note of distress. "What is it?" she whispered, scanning the ravine. "What are you trying to show me?" The bear moved forward slowly, leading her toward a tangle of fallen logs near the stream. As they drew closer, Mary Beth noticed signs she had missed at first glance. Broken branches, disturbed earth, and then she heard it. A low, pained whimper that definitely wasn't coming from the bear. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw it. Trapped between 2 fallen logs, caught in the cruel jaws of an illegal steel trap, lay a young gray wolf. The sight hit her like a physical blow. The trap was old, rusty, exactly like the ones her grandfather had fought to have banned from these mountains 30 years ago. The wolf's leg was caught, but the animal was alive, its eyes bright with pain and fear. "Oh no," Mary Beth breathed, understanding flooding through her. This was what Old Silver had been trying to show her. This was why the bear had sought her out, had led her so carefully to this hidden place. Somehow, this grizzly had recognized that the wolf needed help, and more incredibly had known where to find that help. The memory struck her with sudden clarity. She was 12 years old, sitting in her grandfather's study, reading his journal entry about a similar incident in 1985. He had documented a case where a bear had exhibited unusual behavior around an injured moose calf, drawing attention to it rather than taking advantage of an easy meal. At the time, she had thought it was just one of Grandpa's tall tales. "You knew, didn't you?" she said softly to Old Silver, who had settled at a safe distance, watching intently. "You knew I could help." The bear's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. The careful distance, the deliberate pathfinding, the way it had sought her out specifically, recognizing her from countless encounters during her wildlife documentation. This wasn't just random chance. This was calculated, intelligent behavior that defied everything she thought she knew about wild animals. Mary Beth pulled out her satellite phone with trembling hands. The ranger station had to answer this time. This wasn't just about documenting wildlife anymore. This was about saving a life, about witnessing something extraordinary in these mountains that had been her family's responsibility for 3 generations. As she waited for the call to connect, she watched Old Silver settling down on its haunches, those dark eyes moving between her and the trapped wolf. The bear showed no sign of leaving, as if understanding that its task wasn't finished until help arrived. The morning sun had climbed higher, illuminating the ravine fully now, and Mary Beth Cooper knew she was witnessing something that would change not just her understanding of these creatures, but perhaps our entire perception of wildlife intelligence and compassion. The ranger station finally answered, and Mary Beth found her voice. "This is Mary Beth Cooper," she said, her eyes never leaving the remarkable scene before her. "You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you." While waiting for the wildlife rescue team, Mary Beth fell back on years of experience helping in her father's veterinary clinic. She spoke in low, soothing tones, not just for the wolf's benefit but for her own. The trapped animal's eyes followed her every movement, a mix of fear and exhaustion evident in its gaze. "Help is coming," she assured both the wolf and herself. From her safe distance, she assessed the situation, just as her father had taught her. The trap was old but sturdy, its rusty teeth gripping the wolf's front leg. By some miracle, it seemed to have caught mostly fur and minimal flesh. If they worked fast, the wolf might escape with only minor injuries. Her satellite phone crackled. 20 minutes out, Ranger's Mike Thompson's familiar voice reported. "How's our patient doing?" "Holding steady," Mary Beth responded, her eyes drifting to Old Silver, who remained a constant presence at the edge of the ravine. The bear had positioned itself perfectly, close enough to watch, but far enough not to add stress to the trapped wolf. Its behavior continued to amaze her. When the rescue team arrived, their usual efficient routine faltered at the sight of the grizzly. Mary Beth quickly explained the situation, watching their expressions shift from disbelief to wonder. Head Ranger Thompson shook his head, pulling out their rescue gear. "In 30 years, I've never seen anything like this. The operation required delicate coordination. The wolf would need to be sedated, but they had to work fast. The presence of both a grizzly and an injured wolf made for a potentially explosive situation, yet Old Silver remained calm, watching the proceedings with what Mary Beth could only describe as concerned interest. As the veterinarian administered the sedative, Mary Beth found herself fighting back tears. Hours of helping her father treat injured wildlife came flooding back. Memories of splinting broken wings, cleaning wounds, and nursing sick animals back to health had prepared her for this moment. She knew exactly how to help without getting in the way. The wolf's breathing slowed as the sedative took effect. Mary Beth watched the rescue team work on the trap's mechanism, their movements precise and practiced. Old Silver shifted position, but remained remarkably calm, as if understanding the necessity of these strange human activities. "Almost there," Dr. Sarah Williams, the wildlife vet, murmured. The trap's release mechanism was stuck with rust and age. Every minute felt like an hour as they worked to free the wolf without causing further injury. Mary Beth kept one eye on the bear, still amazed by its patient vigilance. Finally, with a harsh metallic screech, the trap released its grip. The team worked quickly to clean and assess the wound. "Lucky," Dr. Williams announced. "No broken bones. Some deep bruising and minor lacerations, but with antibiotics and rest, this one should make a full recovery." As they prepared to transport the sedated wolf to the wildlife clinic, Mary Beth turned to Old Silver. The bear watched the entire process, and she could have sworn she saw relief in those intelligent eyes. "Thank you," she said softly to the grizzly. "You did good." The morning had stretched into afternoon by the time they carefully loaded the wolf into the transport carrier. Throughout the entire rescue, Old Silver remained, as if wanting to ensure the success of its remarkable mission. Only when the wolf was safely secured did the bear finally turn away, moving with unhurried grace back into the forest that had been its home for so many years. Mary Beth watched it disappear into the trees, her heart full of wonder. In all her years of wildlife documentation, in all the stories her father and grandfather had passed down, nothing had prepared her for the depth of intelligence and compassion she had witnessed today. This rescue was more than just saving one wolf. It was proof that there was still so much to learn about the remarkable creatures that shared these mountains. News travels fast in small towns, but in Thunder Creek, Montana, it moves like lightning. By sunset, Miller's general store had transformed into an impromptu town hall. The old wooden floors creaked under the weight of what seemed like half the town's population, all gathered to hear Mary Beth Cooper tell her extraordinary tale. Tom Miller, whose family had run the store since 1952, perched on his usual stool behind the counter, his weathered face intent as Mary Beth shared every detail. The coffee pot ran dry 3 times as locals filtered in and out, each adding their own perspective to the growing discussion. "My daddy used to talk about something similar," old Mrs. Henderson commented from her regular chair by the pot-bellied stove. "Back in '62, he swore a mother elk led him to her calf caught in barbed wire. Nobody believed him then either." The ranger station's official report sat open on the counter, filled with detailed observations of Old Silver's behavior. Ranger Thompson had documented everything meticulously, knowing this case would draw attention from wildlife researchers across the state. But it was Mary Beth's grandfather's journals that truly captured everyone's imagination. She had retrieved the old leather-bound books from the family ranch that evening, their pages yellow with age but filled with similar accounts. "Look at this entry from 1985, Mary Beth said, carefully turning the brittle pages. Grandpa wrote about bears showing unusual protective behavior toward other injured animals. We all thought they were just stories. But now, the discovery of the illegal trap sparked another heated conversation. These mountains had been declared free of such devices decades ago, after years of effort by Mary Beth's grandfather and others. The fact that old traps still lurked in hidden places sent a ripple of concern through the community. "We need to organize searches," Bill Jackson, a local hunting guide, suggested. "Map out the remote areas, especially around that ravine. Could be more traps out there." The conversation shifted from amazement at the bears' behavior to determination to protect their wildlife. Janet Miller, Tom's wife, started a list of volunteers willing to help with systematic searches of the backcountry. The community that had lived alongside these animals for generations felt a renewed sense of responsibility. Sheriff Pete Anderson made notes about increasing patrols in remote areas, while local teachers planned lessons about wildlife conservation. Mary Beth watched it all unfold, remembering how her grandfather had always said that protecting these mountains wasn't just one family's job. It took a whole community. The most remarkable part was how the story of Old Silver changed people's perspectives about the grizzlies in their midst. These weren't just creatures to be feared or avoided. They were intelligent beings capable of compassion, worthy of protection and respect. As the evening wound down, Mary Beth added her own entry to her grandfather's journal, continuing a family tradition of documenting the extraordinary moments these mountains revealed. She wrote about Old Silver, about the rescue, but mostly about how one bear's remarkable action had awakened something in Thunder Creek. The community had rediscovered its connection to the wilderness, not as something to be conquered or feared, but as a complex web of life where every creature played its part. As people finally headed home under a sky full of stars, Mary Beth knew that Thunder Creek would never look at its wild neighbors quite the same way again. 3 months after the extraordinary encounter with Old Silver, Mary Beth Cooper stood before an eager group of 4th graders at Thunder Creek Elementary School, the same classroom where she had once sat listening to her grandfather's wildlife stories. Now displayed a large map marking recent bear sightings, wolf territories, and safe wildlife corridors. "Who can tell me why we installed the new wildlife cameras last week?" she asked, smiling as small hands shot into the air. Little Jenny Miller, Tom's granddaughter, nearly jumped out of her seat with excitement. "Because bears are smart," Jenny exclaimed. "They might need our help again, just like Old Silver did." The Thunder Creek Wildlife Protection Initiative, started by Mary Beth with support from the Montana Wildlife Federation, had transformed the community's approach to conservation. What began as a simple story about a bear leading her to a trapped wolf had sparked a movement that spread far beyond their small town. The new monitoring system, funded through a partnership with state wildlife agencies, now covered previously unmapped areas of the wilderness. Every week, Mary Beth and a team of trained volunteers checked the footage, not just documenting animal movements, but watching for signs of distress or unusual behavior. Old Silver made regular appearances on these cameras, still patrolling the same territories with that distinctive silver-tipped fur. Local ranchers who had once viewed predators as threats now worked alongside wildlife officials to find better ways to protect their livestock while preserving the natural balance. Bill Jackson, the hunting guide, had become one of the program's strongest advocates, leading educational hikes that taught visitors about respecting and understanding wildlife behavior. The Montana Wildlife Federation had taken special interest in Thunder Creek's initiative, using it as a model for other communities across the state. Mary Beth's detailed documentation of the bear's behavior, combined with her grandfather's historical records, provided valuable insights into animal intelligence and interspecies cooperation. But perhaps the most significant change was in the hearts of Thunder Creek's youngest residents. The elementary school's new wildlife education program, taught jointly by Mary Beth and local rangers, helped children understand that they shared their home with remarkable creatures capable of surprising wisdom and compassion. One crisp autumn morning, almost a year after the rescue, Mary Beth stood at the edge of Thunder Creek Trail with a group of students. They had come to check the newest wildlife camera when they spotted fresh bear tracks in the morning frost. The children fell silent, not with fear, but with hope and wonder. "Look at the size," whispered Jenny. "Could it be Old Silver?" Mary Beth smiled, recognizing the distinctive print pattern. "It sure could be. Remember what my grandfather always said about these mountains?" The children recited together, words that had become something of a motto for their community. Sometimes nature reaches out to us in ways we don't expect. The trick is being quiet enough to understand what it's trying to tell us. As they carefully documented the tracks and checked the camera footage, Mary Beth reflected on how one remarkable encounter had changed everything. The bear that followed her that morning hadn't just led her to a trapped wolf. It had led an entire community back to its roots, back to understanding that the line between wild and human worlds was thinner than anyone had imagined. Thunder Creek had rediscovered its purpose as a place where people and wildlife could share the land with mutual respect and understanding. And somewhere in these vast mountains, a silver-tipped grizzly continued its patrols, a living reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary wisdom comes from the wild hearts that call these mountains home.